In Nazi terminology, Gleichschaltung, translated as coordination, making the same, bringing into line. Synchronization was the process by which Nazi Germany successively established a system of totalitarian control and coordination over all aspects of society. Claudia Koonz uses the term to explain the transformation of ordinary Germans who had not, before 1933, been more prejudiced than their counterparts elsewhere from indifferent bystanders into collaborators with persecution. Among the goals of this policy were to bring about adherence to a specific doctrine and way of thinking and to control as many aspects of life as possible. The apex of the Nazification of Germany was in the resolutions approved during the Nuremberg Rally of 1935, when the symbols of the party and the state were fused and the German Jews were deprived of citizenship, paving the way for the Holocaust. Overview. The period from 1933 to 1937 was characterized by the systematic elimination of non-Nazi organizations that could potentially influence people, such as trade unions and political parties. Those critical of Hitler's agenda were suppressed, intimidated or murdered. The regime also assailed the influence of the churches, for example by instituting the Ministry of Ecclesiastical Affairs under Hans Kerrl. Organizations that the administration could not eliminate, such as the education system, came under its direct control. The Gleichschaltung also included the formation of various organizations with compulsory membership for segments of the population, in particular the youth. Boys first served as apprentices in the Pimpfen, beginning at the age of 6, and at age 10, entered the Deutsches Jungvolk and served there until entering the Hitler Youth proper at age 14. Boys remained there until age 18, at which time they entered into the Arbeitsdienst and the armed forces. Girls became part of the Jungmark-Currency-Dell at age 10 and at age 14, were enrolled in the Bund Deutscher Mark-Currency-Dell. At 18, BDM members went generally to the Eastern Territory for their Flightdienst, or Landjahr, a year of labor on a farm. In 1936 membership of the Hitler Youth numbered just under 6 million. For workers, an all-embracing recreational organization called Kraft durch Freude was set up. In Nazi Germany, even hobbies were regimented, all private clubs were brought under the control of KdF and the Nazi Party. The Kraft durch Freude organization provided vacation trips. With some 25 million members, KdF was the largest of the many organizations established by the Nazis. Workers were also brought in line with the party, through activities such as the Reichsberufswettkampf, a national vocational competition. Koonz writes of how this intense racism came about, despite relatively little attention given to popularizing racial hate. Newsreels, propaganda, films and Hitler's political campaign devoted very little attention to popularizing the racism at the heart of the regime. To be credible, racist propaganda had to emanate from apparently objective sources, with the appearance of knowledge, which had the power to change attitudes. Goebbels said, "The best propaganda is that which, as it were, works invisibly, penetrates the whole of life without the public having any knowledge of the propagandistic initiative," further claiming on another occasion that good propaganda does not need to lie, indeed it may not lie. It has no reason to fear the truth. It is a mistake to believe that the people cannot take the truth. They can. It is only a matter of presenting the truth to people in a way that they will be able to understand. Specific measures. In a more specific sense, Gleichschaltung refers to the legal measures taken by the government during the 20 months following January 30, 1933, when Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. It was in this sense that the term was used by the Nazis themselves. One day after the Reichstag fire on February 27, 1933, President of Germany Paul von Hindenburg, acting at Hitler's request and on the basis of the emergency powers in Article 48 of the Weimar Constitution, issued the Reichstag fire decree. This decree suspended most citizen rights provided for by the Constitution and thus allowed for the arrest of political adversaries, mostly communists, and for terrorizing of other electors by the SA before the upcoming election. In this atmosphere the Reichstag general election of March 5, 1933 took place. The Nazis had hoped to win an outright majority and push aside their coalition partners, the German National People's Party. However, the Nazis won only 43% of the vote, well short of a majority. The Nazi DNVP coalition did enjoy a slim majority, just enough to conduct the ordinary business of government. When the newly elected Reichstag first convened on March 23, 1933, not including the communist delegates because their party had been banned on 6 March, it passed the Enabling Act. This law gave the government in practice, Hitler the right to make laws without the involvement of the Reichstag. For all intents and purposes, the entire Weimar Constitution was rendered void. Soon afterwards the government banned the Social Democratic Party, which had voted against the act. By midsummer, the other parties had been intimidated into dissolving themselves rather than face arrests and concentration camp imprisonment. The first Gleichschaltung law, the first passed using the Enabling Act, dissolved the diets of all Länder except Prussia and ordered them reconstituted on the basis of the votes in the last Reichstag election. It also gave the state governments the same powers the Reich government possessed under the Enabling Act. A second Gleichschaltung law deployed one Reichsstatthalter in each state, apart from Prussia. These officers, responsible to Interior Minister Wilhelm Frick, were supposed to act as local proconsuls in each state, with near-complete control over the state governments. For Prussia, which in any event constituted the bulk of Germany, Hitler reserved these rights for himself and delegated them to Prussian Minister-President Hermann Gar. Paragraph Ring. This law effectively defederalized the Reich for the first time ever. The Trade Union Association ADGB was shattered on May 2, 1933, when ADGB leaders were imprisoned and SA and NSBO units occupied Union facilities. Other important associations, including trade unions, were dissolved and replaced by the German Labour Front, to which all workers had to belong. The Gesetzgebung die Neubildung von Parteien declared the Nazi Party to be the country's only legal party. However, for all practical purposes Germany had been a one-party state since the passage of the Enabling Act. The Gesetze über den Neuaufbau des Reichs formally did away with the concept of a federal republic, converting Germany into a highly centralized state. The states were reduced to mere provinces, as their institutions were practically abolished altogether. All of their powers passed to the central government. It can be argued that this law violated the Enabling Act, since it effectively neutered the Reichsrat, the representation of the Länder at the federal level. Article 2 of the Enabling Act stated that the institutions of both legislative chambers could not be altered. A law passed on February 14 formally abolished the Reichsrat. This law indisputably violated the Enabling Act, since Article 2 explicitly protected the existence of both chambers. However, there was no remedy for violations of Article 2, and no challenge was ever mounted in court. In the summer of 1934 Hitler instructed the SS to kill Ernst Röhr paragraph HM and other leaders of the Nazi parties SA, former Chancellor Kurt von Schleicher and several aides to former Chancellor Franz von Papen in the so-called Night of the Long Knives. These measures received retroactive sanction in a special one-article law regarding measures of state self-defense. The law concerning the highest state office of the Reich prescribed that upon the death of the incumbent president, that office would be merged with the office of the Chancellor, and that the competencies of the former should be transferred to the Verwaltungsrat und Reichskanzler Adolf Hitler, as the law stated. Hindenburg died at 9 o'clock the next morning, making Hitler head of state as well as head of government. Like the law abolishing the Reichsrat, this law actually violated the Enabling Act, which specifically forbade Hitler from tampering with the presidency. Additionally, in 1932 the Constitution had been amended to make the President of the High Court of Justice, not the Chancellor, acting president pending new elections. However, no one raised any objections. This law abolished the last remedy by which Hitler could be legally dismissed, and with it the last check on his power. From this point onward, Hitler can be described as the absolute dictator of Germany until his suicide in 1945. Etymology, Gleichschaltung, as a compound word, is better comprehended by those who speak other languages by listing its predecessor uses in German. The word gleich in German means alike, equal, or the same. Gleichschaltung means something like switching. The word Gleichschaltung had two uses in German for physical, rather than political, meanings: a locking clutch, as used in some machines for connecting two shafts that would otherwise rotate freely such that they rotate at the same speed when in the locked condition. A certain means of wiring an alternating current electrical generator, and AC electric motors, so that when the generator is made to turn at a given speed, or even turn to a certain angle, each motor connected to it will also turn at that speed, or at the same angle. However, the use of the term for these physical meanings has largely been abandoned since the war, because of its Nazi associations. Sources and further reading: Karl Krustel, Deutsche Rechtsgeschichte 3, 2nd ed. 1989, ISBN 3-531-22139-6, Karl Krustel, Rechtsgeschichte Deutschlands im 20. Jahrhundert, 1992. ISBN 3-8252-1681-0. Lebendiges Virtuelles Museum Online, Die Erreichtung des Einparteienstaats 1933, Claudia Koonz, The Nazi Conscience. Cambridge, Massachusetts: The Belknap Press of Harvard University Press, 2003. Hans Banjasavius, To the Bitter End, An Insider's Account of the Plot to Kill Hitler, 1933-1944. New York: Da Capo Press, 1947. Karl Dietrich Bracher, Stages of Totalitarian Integration, The Consolidation of National Socialist Rule in 1933 and 1934, pages 109-28. From Republic to Reich: The Making of the Nazi Revolution, 10 essays, edited by Hajo Hoban, New York, Pantheon Books, 1972. Everett Hughes, The Gleichschaltung of the German Statistical Yearbook, A Case in Professional Political Neutrality. The American Statistician Vol. 9, December, 1955, pages 8-11. Notes